Welcome back to KuLAB. My name is Ku. This is our laboratory for learning. Today we're going to continue our business news breakdown series and take a look at an article about Microsoft's recent hack on their SharePoint servers and how that hack affected their stock prices. And even more broadly, how these kinds of hacks have been affecting stock prices of tech companies as of late. We'll break down some English words, we'll break down some business English words, and we'll break down some business concepts. So let's go ahead and jump right in and start our next KuLAB. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at our article here. I always like to point out the author here, so we're going to be thanking Nate Wolf for this article here. Our title reads, "The Microsoft hack affected some of the highest levels of government. The stock is up." So we're going to be looking at the idea of the highest levels of government, this of course being the US government, how they use Microsoft SharePoint, but how the stock is up, why it's reacting that way. So it didn't punish Microsoft as much as we thought it might. So let's jump in. As details about the cyber attacks on Microsoft SharePoint servers have trickled out, the situation has sounded more and more concerning. Microsoft stock, however, barely has budged. So very quickly, cyber attacks are online attacks or attacks through the intranet. Words like trickled out. Trickled means to come out slowly, just a little bit, like a little bit of water from a faucet, just trickled out. It means there was not like a lot of information all at once. Maybe on Monday, some information, Tuesday, some information, Wednesday. So it trickled out. Barely has budged. Budged in this situation means hasn't moved a lot at all. Barely has budged means hasn't moved a lot. Barely means just a little bit or not very much at all. And budge means to move. Microsoft initially disclosed the hack on July 18th, saying it was aware of active attacks against SharePoint server customers that exploited vulnerabilities partially addressed by an earlier security update. So this is saying that they did give some information. Disclosed is to tell others about it, to give out information. They did know that it was active attacks and customers that exploited. So in this particular case, to exploit is using a vulnerability to gain unauthorized access, means you're taking advantage of. And vulnerabilities here in this case is a weakness in software or something that you're not protected against. So they took advantage of some vulnerabilities in the software that wasn't protected against. Several US government agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security and the National Institutes of Health, were breached, according to multiple reports. So this next section is quite important. It talks about the agencies in the US government that were affected. And the first one is the Department of Homeland Security. So that is an organization that was started under the George W. Bush II, the Bush administration. The Department of Homeland Security is involved in national security for the United States. It also has a lot of information about a lot of people. So this is a big government agency with a lot of data. All right, we're also going to look at the word breached. Breached means they found information or they got into the department. So in this case, they were able to break through the protections using Microsoft SharePoint. A DHS spokesperson confirmed there is no evidence of data exfiltration at DHS or any of its components at this time. So in terms of exfiltration, it means they didn't take it out. They weren't able to get it out of the system. So they weren't able to take any data that was sensitive. Those revelations followed a Tuesday blog post from Microsoft alleging that hackers linked to a Chinese government had exploited security vulnerabilities in the company's SharePoint service platform, which organizations use to share files and collaborate. Microsoft is now probing whether it tipped off the actors. So probing in this case means investigating. So they're looking into, to probe something means to pick at it, to poke at it. Usually means investigating, a probe. whether it tipped off the actor. So tipped off is give them some indication that they are there. Tipped off in this situation means they let the other people know that they were watching. Whether or not they tipped off the Chinese actors. So whether or not they let the Chinese actors, alleged Chinese actors, know that they were watching. Now let's discuss how it affected Microsoft stocks and tech stocks in general. You'd think that if groups of alleged foreign cyber criminals are using weaknesses in a popular enterprise software to hack into, among other things, a nuclear weapons agency, investors might get skittish. Not so. Through Friday's close, Microsoft stock is up 0.4% since July 17th, the day before the news of the attack first broke. So this paragraph is saying you would think that if someone used your technology to break into, U.S. government. So this paragraph is telling us that you would think that if your software was used and had vulnerabilities that could be used to break into government offices, something as important as the U.S. nuclear office or the Department of Homeland Security, that your stock would go down. Right? Investors might get skittish. Skittish in this situation means they're very scared of it, like a small animal. They don't want to approach it. They're not willing to spend money. They're not going to buy anything. So they're they back off quite a bit. But this is saying not so. It's saying that Microsoft stock even went up since the day before the attack, through the attack, and even till today. So this idea that investors are going away from that or not investing in Microsoft doesn't seem to be so. So let's take a look at why that is. One key reason for the muted reaction is that major hacks have become the cost of doing business for technology and cybersecurity companies. So they're saying that cost of doing business is just part of business. You are going to have hacks with any technology you use, or what the investors are saying. So a muted reaction. In this case, muted means a not very big reaction. It's more like, well, we don't care as much. While the breaches are concerning, investors have become somewhat desensitized. Hacks and outages have become frequent, but they tend to have, at worst, minor financial cost. So this idea of desensitized is an important word. To be sensitive to something means it really affects you, right? Desensitive, D meaning not, desensitized means you've gotten used to it. It doesn't affect you in the same way anymore. Many times if you eat a lot of hot food, you become desensitized to pepper, or you become desensitized to very spicy food. And so you can eat it very often because it's not as hot for you anymore. So the investors are saying, we've seen so many data breaches. We've seen so many technologies have these sort of hacks that now we just expect it. It's the cost of doing business. We just expect this kind of behavior from any technology. And so now certain technologies don't get punished as much as they might in the past. Luria pointed to the cybersecurity company CrowdStrike Holdings as one recent example. CrowdStrike stock plummeted after the company's faulty software update last July caused a global technology outage. But analysts saw the sell-off as an opportunity to buy rather than viewing the breach as an existential threat. They were vindicated. So this is an example of last year. CrowdStrike Holdings had a very similar sort of outage. The entire internet practically went down, and they were punished. But it turns out that a lot of investors actually just bought it up when it was very cheap, and they did not see the breach as an existential threat. Existential means like life-altering, like the highest stakes you can have, like threatens your very being, the very existence of who you are. So it's usually an adjective to describe something that's very, very, very important, a threat that, can end all threats. They were vindicated. Vindicated in this context is when you say you're right or you think something is correct, and then you are proven to be correct. So vindicated means many people maybe told you this is dumb, this is not very smart thing to do, and it turns out it was a smart thing to do. So you feel like you have been vindicated, like you have been proven correct, even when people doubted you very much. Shares have climbed more than 80% in the last year. So these people who bought CrowdStrike, even though they had this major breach, now have a lot more money because the stock has went up. It helps that Microsoft has proven in the past that it can address cyber attacks with no meaningful repercussions. In fact, Microsoft's latest digital defense report found that its customers face 600 million attacks daily from cyber criminals and nation-state actors between July 2023 and July 2024. So Microsoft is saying in 1 year, customers faced 600 million attacks daily. This is saying that nation-states like China or Russia or any other government agency is trying to hack in and trying to exploit these weaknesses, as is the United States, of course. But the fact that 600 million attacks happen daily is super significant. So if one or two get through, if something happens, it's usually not as bad. None of this to say hacks are unimportant. Shareholders just have other issues on their mind. Ahead of Microsoft's fiscal fourth quarter earnings report on July 30th, investors mostly are paying attention to the company's artificial intelligence work and Azure cloud computing business rather than SharePoint. So what this is saying is that even though it might be pretty significant for the customers, the shareholders, the investors don't think it's that big of a deal. They're really looking at AI and how Microsoft is doing in their AI or cloud computing business. Cloud computing business similar to Amazon's AWS. So a lot of websites use this business to grow. And so that is more important than SharePoint or any sort of data breach in SharePoint. So the investors are really focused on where Microsoft is making money as opposed to any sort of data breaches. It would be a surprise if Microsoft doesn't address the breach in some way on Wednesday, but if recent history is anything to go by, don't expect those comments to move the stock much, if at all. So they're saying Microsoft will talk about it, they'll talk about who's affected, but no matter how bad it is, it probably won't move the stock. So this article is kind of a reminder that even if something is bad, and in this case a data breach pretty significant on pretty significant government agencies in the United States, as long as it doesn't affect the financial market, then investors won't see a pretty big deal. You know, regardless of what you think, it could be very worrying that we see data breaches as just the cost of doing business. We see them as like, oh, well, that's just how it works sometimes. It can be quite disheartening, especially if it's your data that was stolen, that investors don't really care as long as the companies make a lot more money. So if you're looking at something only through a financial lens, then data breaches are becoming much less impactful on stock market and investors. All right, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that business news breakdown, an interesting article about Microsoft's SharePoint hack and its relatively small effect on the stock price. So come back and join us in a few days for another business news breakdown. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed it, hit that like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you in the next KuLAB.